Now let's get to your book and let's get to where we are in America right now. Not just the media, but American society, civil society, the respect for constitutional precedent and norms. It does seem, as America is about to celebrate 250 years of the Declaration of Independence, and you've just written a new book, which I'm going to ask you about, that this is a moment of massive identity crisis and a crisis of almost a constitutional crisis. Oh, is that too dramatic?
No, I think it's right, although we've been here before. And if you remember 50 years or so ago, we had gone through Watergate, the resignation of the president, the assassinations of Kennedys and Kings, urban riots, and then we had our bicentennial and rang the Liberty Bell, the tall ships came in, and we healed. We came together as a nation. I was hoping this would happen for our 250th because we are so polarized. And it's why I wrote this book, which is let's go back to the Declaration. We hold certain truths to be self-evident. Let's remind ourselves. And when I say ourselves, it's not just America, but now more than half the world has that sense of democracy, of individual rights and freedom. And that's what they stood for 250 years ago. And we really should try to celebrate it this July 4th.
Celebrate and try to restore it, because it seems to be framed undefended. I mean, I'm watching from abroad, but the great values that the Declaration gave to the world, not just to America, and the rule of law and all the norms just do seem to be under attack by this current Trump administration, who makes no bones about it. They believe in the maximum extension of executive power at the expense of all the other branches of government, legislative, judicial, media.
I think what you've seen, though, is it's longer than that. It's the past 20 or 30 years where globalism and free trade were great at creating wealth, but it hollowed out a middle class, a working class, whether it be in Europe or the United States, and you had a backlash. And sometimes we didn't fully understand it. I mean, we who lived in Washington or New York and others. And I think we have to get back to that notion of common ground, where if we're going to have wealth in a society, whether it's AI-driven or technology-driven, we have to make sure everybody participates and that we all share a certain common values and common services. That got a bit lost. So you've had a populist revolt, whether it's here with Brexit, whether it's in Hungary and other, but you also see the pendulum starting to swing back. So I'm optimistic.
Good. I'm glad you're optimistic, because it's very important. America is the world's only superpower and has those unique ideals that it has been transmitting to the rest of the world for so many years. Your book is called The Greatest Sentence Ever Written.
Yeah.
What is it and why?
Well, it's the second sentence of the Declaration. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Pretty quick, right? And you know, it seems like we could all say it by heart, but I wanted us to look at each of those phrases. What do you mean by created equal? What is the pursuit of happiness? When we ask about an economy, well, you know, Jefferson had, the phrase was pursuit of property when John Locke wrote it. Jefferson says pursuit of happiness because you want a good society. So let's look at those values that we share. That sentence did not describe America in 1776. 1/5 of the continent was enslaved people. But that sentence became a forcing mechanism. 7 years after it's written, Lincoln uses it at Gettysburg to say a nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. He's burying 7,058 people who had died to make that sentence more true. Martin Luther King quotes that sentence. So that sentence becomes a mission statement, not just for the United States, but for all people who love freedom around the world.
So, unfortunately, approval of U.S. leadership, according to Gallup, has declined by 10 points or more in 44 countries around the world between 24 and 25. Declines were concentrated amongst U.S. allies, including many NATO partners. China has surpassed the U.S. in global approval in 2025. This is crazy stuff. This is game-changing stuff, possibly. What does America have to do to regain its supremacy, at least in human rights and civil rights and all the constitutional rights? I don't mean militarily. I mean in all the rights that the Declaration gave the world.
When you talk about the Declaration, I talk about the great second sentence, but the first sentence explains that, which says, a decent respect for the opinions of mankind. That's what Jefferson and the founders had. And what we need to do is understand that our power comes not just from our battleships, but because of our values. And American foreign policy always has to be a balance or an interweaving of realism, where we look at, our national interests, and idealism, where we say we're standing for these values around the world. I think we've lost that balance now. We have to reassert that we're the country that believes in individual rights, freedom, and democracy.